Testing. Testing. All right. Welcome, everyone. I know it's been a while, but hopefully I'll be able to do this a little bit more regularly. All right. But how's everyone doing? Good start to the week so far for y'all? All right. But while I'm waiting for the first person to come up, something that I've been working on is I got a couple of video essays that I'm thinking of doing, and I've actually got someone who asked about doing a video on the model cosmological argument. So I need to double check a little bit more into model logic, but I think I've got the gist of the model logic, and it's at least the cosmological one is a little bit easier to follow than the ontological one. But let's see. Hey, Lizzie, long time no see. Let's see. All right, looks like we've got someone in the guest request box.
Yo.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, and how old are you?
25.
All right, and what brings you up here today?
Well, I just wanted to ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
So, wait, you're a Christian, right?
Yes.
So, why?
Do you mean like
just because it's like comfortable, or do you actually believe it?
no? I do genuinely believe it to be true.
What does it offer?
I mean, what does 2 + 2 = 4 offer other than it's true? Like,
I'm saying, what does it offer though? Is there any result?
Well, that's what I was saying is that I don't think truth needs to be useful or offer anything in order for it to be true.
Yeah, it can offer community, right? I get what you're saying. Right? I know what it offers, right? I'm saying, what else does it offer though? You didn't kind of get the question, I guess.
Well, no, I'm just saying that I am Catholic because it is true, simplicator. That's
Yeah,
the
and
reason
what
why I'm
does that
Catholic.
offer being Catholic? Do you think that offers something in the afterlife?
Even if it didn't, I would still be Catholic. That's my point. Is I want to believe and follow true things. I believe that's the Catholic Church, so that is
Okay.
why.
Okay, let me ask you a question, right? So, why doesn't the Catholic Church understand Second Temple Judaism, what Jesus was?
You mean why is the Catholic Church not a follower of Second Temple Judaism like Jesus was?
Jesus was a Second Temple Jew.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when we say about let me give you an example, right? So when it talks about eternal life, what do you think that means?
So do you notice the prompt that this is not a debate space?
Well, no, I understand. I'm just asking you a question.
No.
I'm not debating you. Debating would be different. I'm just asking you a question.
No. You're being very aggressive right now. So what is
No,
the
I'm not. I'm just asking you a question.
read the prompts. What does the prompt
Yeah,
say?
that's fine. I'm asking you a question about Catholicism.
Okay.
I'm not debating
So
you. I don't care if you
so
believe it. I'm asking you a question. I'm giving you an example.
so your question is, why is the Catholic Church something other than what Jesus himself was? Correct?
Yeah, well, why don't they understand the context?
What context that we should understand that we don't? That's like you're not being very
Okay, I'm gonna
direct
I'm
in
gonna
your
give it to you.
question.
So, like I gave you an example, right? Eternal life. What is eternal life to Jesus, and what's eternal life to you? I'm just giving an example. There can be more,
I
but this
mean,
is one.
are you asking like eternal life in the sense of heaven, eternal life in the sense of hell? Like what is specifically that you feel like is in contradictory?
Yeah. So the contradictory, right, is like when he's offering eternal life. I believe he's talking about life of the age, right? People today think he's talking about some place in the sky. That's not what he's saying. So the Catholic Church doesn't catch that though.
The Catholic Church doesn't believe heaven is in the sky.
They believe that you're gonna live forever with Jesus.
Uh-huh.
He's not offering that though. He's offering that to an audience that's going through something. They're gonna have life of the age because
I
they
will
believe in
go
two
at
ages.
I will go before you and build a place for you in my Father's house.
Yeah, he's talking to his
Mm-hmm.
audience in the new
Okay.
covenant. He's not talking to
Okay.
you. He's talking to his audience. There's an audience.
So you're saying that everyone that came after those who within the second generation is not a part of the followers of Christ.
I mean, you can follow Christ, bro, but he's talking to an audience. He's a Jewish dude teaching
Mm-hmm.
Judaism to his audience. And
Mm-hmm.
this gets reinterpreted by Greek philosophy when the church comes in and the church fathers, and they don't understand anything mostly about Jesus. And this is what happens. This is why people believe this, right?
So
So
this is
when he's
so
offering
this is
eternal life, though,
so KGS, this is what
okay.
I was talking about, that this is about not you're trying to push questions about proving Catholicism and Christianity true. That's not what the purpose of this is about.
So
So
what's the
that is
purpose
why
of it about?
do you have a question about Catholicism or philosophy that I can help you in
That is the
your
question about
understanding?
Catholicism.
No, there's a
Why don't they
difference between
understand Second Temple Judaism?
what is your claim that they don't. But again,
You
that's
got,
getting
I can't hear you. You
into
cut out.
what is the claim that they don't. So that's the first thing. The
The
second thing
claim that
is
they
that
don't is they don't understand the context of Second Temple Judaism. Is what
that's
I'm
just the
saying.
claim. That's the
It's
claim
incorrect.
again. That's a circular claim. But this is outside of the context of what
No, it's not a
this live
circular
is.
claim. So what is the concept of heaven to these people and the concept of heaven to the Catholic?
So this was outside of the concept of this live. Like I told you, this is not a debate live. This is meant to help those who want to engage in conversations and have a dialogue with people of differing beliefs to have a better understanding on how to express those ideas, as well as have an idea, like if they just have a genuine question about what Catholicism teaches, not if Catholicism is true or not. Like I said, KGS, this is not a debate, so I don't know why I'm running. I have laid out what the groundwork for this live is for, and you decide to ignore that. If you're deciding to ignore that, then I'm just going to drop you and move on to one who does want to have a conversation.
Hey, what's up? How are you?
I'm doing all right. How old are you?
I'm 18.
All right. And how do I pronounce your name? Abdi?
Yes, that works.
All right. And what brings you up here today?
Yeah, a couple things.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly one argument for theism, and then I also had a bit, actually, just wanted to deeper understand a bit about the Catholic view about Christianity. Is it okay if I can do both, or am I only allowed to
Yeah.
do one?
No, you can do both, but we'll do it it one at a time if that's all right. So we'll start with your
Yeah, of
the argument
course.
that you wanted on. You said theism, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Before I dive into that, do you want to maybe share why you believe in theism? Because I do as well. I just wondered if you have
Uh,
any specific reason. If you don't want to share,
yes.
that's fine.
I mean, there's different reasons that I would say can lead to one that will depend on one's particular metaphysical worldview, and I've got a couple listed on my channel. I am currently
Okay.
working on a worldview independent argument. What I mean by that is basically like this is just because it recently came to my attention. There is a worldview called priority monism, and priority monism is the view that the ultimate foundation is the is composed of parts, and it is, in order for you and I are a part of that ultimate foundation, but in order for us to even exist, that ultimate foundation is prior to our existence, but it is the composite of all that exists. It's the totality of the universe. I'm still looking into it, so that could be a
Mhm.
misrepresentation of it, but that's the basic idea. Versus the view that I
Sounds
hold,
good.
where there is something
Yeah.
called the simples, where if you what is ultimately foundational is something that is purely simple. So and you take the simples and you combine them together and you start getting into these composite things, and the universe is the result of the combination of those composites. So instead of the universe or the totality of existence being the foundational aspect, it is the result of these simples. So those
Okay.
are two competing worldviews, and an argument that works for priority monism isn't going to work in the other, and vice versa. So I'm trying to develop an argument that works independent of worldviews.
Awesome, awesome. Also, do you think I gotta be a bit personal. I'm gonna be a bit personal here. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I've been going, I'm sure you know about like Monkey Boy and like Ogre and stuff. I'm, theist, but I'm also a person that is I strongly emphasize having like beliefs that are justified and adequate
Yep.
evidence, and I'm starting to get doubting that I'm being inconsistent with my standard of evidence now that I
Mm-hmm.
believe in God. Do
No,
you think
and
that I'm like unjustified for my belief?
yes. So back when I was doing lives on a regular basis, one of the points that I was making is that a rational justification does not necessarily have to be true. Now, Ogar and I actually have talked extensively on this particular topic, and for example, he will disagree as far as like what makes a belief justified. But that's because his epistemic standard for a justification is very, very, very high. Whereas I think for most cases, it doesn't necessarily have to be at the level of, or at the level that Ogar would like it to be. But in Ogar's defense, he's being very consistent with his command, with his demands. Um, but I think an example is like, say, something like the A theory, or I'm sorry, not the A theory, the temporal past being infinite or finite. In the scientific community, you'll have people who are holding to a finite, and they hold it very strongly to the point of declaring, no, I know that it's finite, and they'll give justification for it. And then you'll have those that say, no, it is infinite or not finite, and they'll give justifications for it, and they hold to it. Ian is an example of someone. Ian is an example of someone.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Where did I cut out on? Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
you said I guess yeah, I can. Something about like his evidence being justified or something.
Yeah. So, or the evidence that he has justifies the position that he holds. Now, it when you really push them on it, like, hey, like, can you definitively say that you have positively eliminated the opposite side? The answer is going to be no. But they're still justified in supporting their position, even though it's not a true knowledge claim, so to speak, or like a position that they can claim to have true knowledge on. So you can have a justified position even if it's not fully demonstrated. Um, so you're going to find different people who will have different levels for that epistemic requirement, but that, depending on the claim and what the justification is, you can be justified in a belief or in a position that hasn't eliminated every single other possibility.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that's very rational. And I think you brought up a really good example with it, like universe being, I think you said universe being like finite or
Yeah.
infinite. And I think it's
In
also, I would say like,
in
yeah,
in time
yeah,
aspect, but yeah.
yeah. I think it's, I'm personally agnostic to it. And I think it's fair to be, you know, justified for or against. But also just wanted to thank you for that, because that
Mhm.
definitely cleared up like some of my quote unquote doubts. But now getting into like why I actually came up here, I
Yeah.
wanted to defend my, I have like a fine you, I'm sure you know of this argument, like the psychophysical harmony one. I wanted to just get stronger at defending it, and the
Mhm.
main issue I've found with it is, or the main issue of, or the main problem I've run into is that the opponents will generally hold to like a physicalist view, and they just generally don't believe that the exist like psychophysical harmony exists. So I'm just curious, how do you think I would be able to kind of push them on this and stuff like that?
Yeah.
If that's okay.
So before getting into it, because I would like to look at the argument itself, from the way that you described the issue that you're running into, is that problem that I was talking about it at the very beginning about like the different metaphysical worldviews. So, for example, one of my very favorite arguments from Thomas Aquinas is from his work on being in essence. And the work is like 20 pages. You can find it for free online, but the summation, and this is just going to be a quick summation to illustrate the point, is P1 um, parts are prior to wholes. And what I mean by that is, like, for example, I am comprised of atoms. Atoms are a part of me. So, in order for me to exist, atoms have to exist prior, or at least be ontologically prior, in order for me to exist. P2, you cannot infinitely divide parts, or you cannot divide parts infinitely. So existence plus identity, those are still two different parts. And then you do one more division, and so now you just have existence itself, where the identity
What
of
is this
thing.
argument for? Sorry.
This is Aquinas's argument for God. But conclusion, um,
No.
the indivisible simple is what we mean when we say God. So, like I said, this is just a very brief overview of that argument. Now, this works in my worldview where parts are ontologically prior to their wholes. But for priority monism, which people like Dr. Blitz, as well as several others, hold to because of their understanding of like the way quantum mechanics work. Ogar's mentioned before that he holds to a kind of interdependency where I guess like a like where you get to something that is still comprised of parts, but each part is interdependent on each other. Um, this argument is not going to work in those worldviews. So in your situation, the argument that you're running for the that is going to, if it runs into the issue for the physicalist, it means that argument just doesn't work within that worldview. So you're either going to need to find an argument that does work in that worldview, or figure out a way to show why that worldview is wrong. I think one of my favorite examples of this is Thomas Aquinas's point on, uh, you know, you cannot prove or demonstrate that the past is finite, or even that the past is infinite. So he constructed his arguments to work whether the past is infinite or not. You'll notice in his cosmological arguments, not once does he argue that the universe had a beginning, because he recognized that you can't demonstrate that through logic alone. So my recommendation for you is to, because it's hard to argue against a particular worldview, is to find an argument that works independent whether physicalism is true or not.
Sounds good. Sounds really good. Yeah, thank you. Um,
Absolutely.
just- First of all, you're like being very helpful. So like super appreciate you. If no one has told you that.
Honestly, I wasn't sure how successful lives like this would be, but people like Ogar and I talk extensively, as well as and I see in the chat, Trees decided to join us. Trees mentioned it, but several people I've talked to have said that they would love to see something like this, where I can help individuals like you out, where it's like, hey, same team, but let me show some critiques and challenges that you're going to run into. My recommendation is to try to find an argument that works independently of physicalism. Um, Otherwise, it's going to run into that problem. Now, if you come to someone who doesn't accept physicalism, then by all means run your argument, because it'll work for them. But if it's worldview dependent, you just got to recognize that it's a worldview dependent argument.
Yeah, that sounds really good because I actually didn't know that the opposition having like another worldview would make it so that I thought that would turn the debate to being like which worldview is stronger, but I actually didn't know that you can you can I had to switch argument if they have another worldview. So thank you for that. I didn't know that. Now
Yeah.
going to my next thing. Yeah, I have so it's unfortunately like proposed like an argument. So I'll try and say it like in a question manner. I'm not like gonna debate here if that's fine. It's
No,
mainly
that's fine.
just some yeah. So it is an argument like quote unquote like against Christianity or whatever. But I'll propose it in a way that where I'm asking questions. So the first the issue I have is yeah, let me just go real quick and I want to make sure. I'm pretty sure it's not sound, but yeah, you should just correct me. So it's premise one. Jesus can have natures with contradictory attributes.
Okay.
Premise two, Jesus can have a human nature that allows him to sin.
Jesus can have a human nature that can allow him to sin.
Yes.
Okay.
Premise three, and I know this one is gonna. I had some issues defending this, so maybe this is where you can help me. It's if Jesus can have a nature that allows him to sin, then Jesus, the person, can sin.
All right. So the third one was if Jesus can have a nature that can sin,
That allows him to sin.
that allows him to sin.
Then Jesus, the person, can sin. And this is the one I had a bit issue like defending. So yeah, and then premise four, Jesus is God. Conclusion, therefore God can be sinful.
All right. Give me just a moment. I'm getting let's see.
Yeah, it's I don't want to. I'm like not ready to do, or any. I want to debate. Just like if you can give any critique, I would love that and appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So the first thing to understand is a couple of different things. So I almost have issues with almost every single one of the premises. So premise one, Jesus can end natures with contradictory attributes. So the thing to understand about the incarnation is it's not necessarily that P1 is incorrect, but it can be a little bit misleading. So what do I mean by that? Let's say, for example, I ask you, are you hot or are you not hot? Or are you hot or are you cold? Now, a lot of people take hot and cold to be contradictory, and in a lot of cases, they are. Like, you can't be hot and not hot in the same place in the same regards, correct?
Yes.
So, but if I was to ask you, hey, while you're holding in one hand an ice cube and in another hand a hot pocket that you just took out of the microwave and it's burning to the touch, are you hot or are you cold? You would say, well, I'm both, because on one hand you're cold and on the other you're hot. But that's not a contradiction. It's just that you're experiencing two states that, if they were happening at the same time in the same location in the same capacity, they would be a contradiction. So when we say that Jesus can have natures with contradictory attributes, that the better way to understand that is closer to that hot pocket and ice cube analogy. In one nature, he possesses these attributes, and in these and in the other aspect, uh, or in the other nature, he has these separate attributes. So they're not in the sense of a true contradiction. So the wording there would just need to be updated a little bit to more accurately represent the theology. Um,
Okay, got it.
premise two, the theology is that Jesus has a perfect human nature. And this ties into the Catholic understanding. Now, this is going to be very Catholic in nature. You're going to have some Protestants that would be willing to bite this bullet, and so this might work for them. But for premise two, it's understood that Jesus has a perfect human nature. Sin is not an attribute of human nature. It's sin is what happens when we misuse our free will, when we misuse our attributes. And this ties into what's called privation theory, which I would recommend looking into St. Augustine if you want a lot more ideas on the privation theory. The privation theory. All right. I don't know what's going on with my internet, but that
It
perfect
was a
human
bit buggy
nature,
there, no problem.
but that perfect human nature wouldn't, in order for it to remain perfect, it wouldn't sin. Now, I guess people can make an argument as far as like, well, could he have done less? No, because of the divine nature aspect of it. But human nature is not inherently sinful or does not require sin. So that would be the issue that I would have with premise two, and then the rest of it kind of follows from that.
Can I then change, or I think that might be a miswording from me. I think how I would propose it instead is like this argument is first of all like only if the Christian hypothesis is true, so it's going to be like more of like an internal critique. So then
Yeah.
I would make it like Jesus can have a nature, so not necessarily a human nature, just an added on, like, is it logically possible for Jesus to have a nature that allows him to sin, basically, is what I think would be a better way to
The answer to
put it.
that, the answer to that, at least within the Catholic worldview, is no, due to that privation theory. The way
Got it.
that I think one of the best ways to describe or to explain privation theory.
Yeah, please do that.
Truth. So P1. So I actually, or it might be easier without the syllogism, but truth is a part of our ability of speech. So when we speak, we're able to tell a truth. And as long as we're telling a truth, we're in correspondence with reality. But because what we say is not the same as reality, that means that our speech is also able to not be in correspondence with reality, and that's where lying comes in. For God, what he says doesn't just describe reality, it's what becomes reality. So it would, because of that, whatever he says becomes truth. It's not that he speaks truth, it's just that truth is what he says. So it is impossible for him to lie, in the same way it would be impossible for a square circle, just due to the fact of, by trying to have him lie, you're basically having him do, hey, can God create me and not create me? Which is a contradiction.
Yeah. So I do agree that it's a contradiction. Now, the idea, the way I'm thinking about it is that, granted, I saw what you said with the premise one, him not having contradictory attributes. The way you explained it does make sense. I didn't quite personally now where it doesn't make sense for me is, for example, let's take the attribute omnipotence and let's take the attribute weakness. What I don't understand is, how can like someone be both omnipotent and weak?
I have not had this much internet problem when I was first joining. I'll need to figure out what's going on. But the way that someone can be omnipotent in one nature and also not omnipotent in another nature, is, a lot of people misunderstand what omnipotence is describing. So just like with that truth example, just like how we might say, oh, I'm talking and God is talking, but God's speech is different than ours, because it's not like if I just spoke the truth better or more truthfully, then all of a sudden I'm able to create reality. Like, no, that, like, it's not a difference of degrees. Like, I'm not able to do more truth to then create reality. But God's speech, God's truth is of a different kind than my truth, than my speaking of truth. So omnipotence isn't a matter of a difference of degrees, but it's a difference of kind. Like, it's a whole different category. And that's also getting into the nature of divine simplicity, and how the attributes are understood within in that simple nature.
Got it. So it might be I don't. So the speaking example where you said, what were you trying to make? What point were you trying to make with the speaking example or the speaking truth example?
Yeah. So when you and I speak truth, we say that what we say is true when what we say is in alignment with reality, that it corresponds to reality. So we're describing reality when we speak. For God, when he speaks, he doesn't just describe reality, it is reality. What he describes, what he says, is his act of creation. So when God speaks, we might say, we use the same terminology because it's similar to us when we speak, but he's actually doing something very different from us than when we speak.
Got but but so you're saying that everything that so speaking is just like saying stuff, right? So you're saying that everything God says is like like true, or
It's
did I understand that?
it's more of what God says becomes real. What is
Is that like
real?
is that necessary? So like, what if he says, well, what if he says something is going to happen? Does that, well, that's not necessarily real yet, or did I
In
misunderstand?
Well, that depends on your understanding of time. I hold to eternalism B theory, as well do a lot of not only atheists but also even classical theists. But the point that I'm getting at, like the argument that you tried to present to try to argue about like God able to sin, is it might work for a lot of Protestants or a lot of people who aren't very well versed in privation theory. The divine simplicity and the analogous nature of the divine attributes. But with someone who does know those things, the argument's not really going to work very well just because it is doing a category error for that.
Sounds really good. I do want to say though, on the past two arguments I gave, I want to say I don't want to have these arguments to like quote unquote win a debate. The more reason, I'm more so creating creating or understanding these arguments just for like a valid reason to like justify or maybe get someone to think what I think. Not that I should win because they know too little. So do you think there's any like argument for theism that works without the opponent like knowing less or just like not knowing something or being wrong, and it just works because it just works regardless of
That's actually what I'm working on, is a worldview
okay.
independent argument.
Right. Okay, well, I don't think I have any more questions for now. How often are you gonna go live? Because I would really love to tap into
I'm
these.
gonna try going live daily. My schedule has been crazy, and I just actually finished up a job interview, but I'm probably
Congrats.
not going to be able to go live tomorrow or Wednesday. Something came up that I wasn't expecting, but I'm trying to be live a little bit more on the regular.
Sick. Okay, yeah, another thing I didn't quite understand, or the way I currently think about the problem of natural evil is that the natural evil has to occur for the world to be consistent with natural laws. For example, volcano like eruption occurs because of like tectonic plates, and just consistent there, and then someone tells me, well, if God is all powerful, then he could have he didn't need, and if he's all powerful, then he doesn't need to abide by those laws. He could have just created a reality without those laws.
I need to move rooms real quick. You can keep talking. I'm just gonna mute and turn my camera off, but I'll still be hearing you.
Okay, sick. Yeah. So yeah, the way I currently think about that is that like, yeah, as I said, God needs to be, or the natural laws need to be consistent, and then the way but then on the second hand, I'm also thinking that, hold on, if God is all powerful, then why does he need to abide by those laws? He could have created other laws. And then the thing I run into there is that if I think like that, then I would need to think that a whole other reality needs to be the case, and where these natural laws aren't present, and we have other natural laws, which in turn would result in like a whole other universe. But that still doesn't like debunk my, or not debunk, like answer, like refute the previous claims I made. So I'm just a bit curious on how to understand the problem of natural evil, assuming God is all powerful in conjunction with being all good. I still haven't quite gotten around to understanding that. And
yeah, so the problem of evil is definitely one of the most harder questions, especially within the theological discourse. Something that I would recommend doing, though, is making a distinction between suffering and the nature of evil. A lot of people do equate the two. Like, if something is suffering, it is evil. But that then gets into that worldview comparison. The question of natural evils doesn't actually work for privation theory. So like that's something that you're going to need to look into to figure out what view of evil and what your metaphysics of good and evil are, in order to figure out how to respond to that. Because privation theory, while I think it should be universal among Christians, it really isn't. But look into it, study that worldview, and see if it's something that makes sense to you, and just take it from there.
heck yeah, and the what did you call that? Privation theory?
Privation theory. It's privation.
Privation theory. Okay.
Yep.
You already explained it, right?
Yeah, that I alluded to it, gave a quick example, but there's a lot more depth to it. There
Yeah,
is
yeah,
an SEP article on it that I can get over to you if you send me a follow.
yeah.
And St.
Yeah, I've already
Augustine
followed.
also. Perfect. And then St. Augustine also is one of the extensive writers on privation theory.
Super dope, super sick. All right. I don't think I have any more questions for now.
All right.
But you would say that you would hold to the theory that under your worldview, that the problem of natural evil isn't actually like or like the problem of evil isn't like a deep refutal.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's irrefutable. It's still challenging, similar to like say the problem of divine hiddenness. A lot of the different problems where reality seems like it's impersonal, but I think with the proper metaphysical understanding, those problems are not insurmountable. Are they difficult? Yes, but they're not insurmountable.
All right. Sick. All right. Thank you so much. I
Absolutely.
have nothing more. Thank you so much.
All
You
right.
helped a lot, and I'd be happy to tune back in another time. Peace.
Thank you. You have a good one.
You too. Bye.
All right. Well, real quick before I move on to the next guest, thank you, Poopman Jones, for the heart me's, the gifts, and the Go Popular. Thank you, Ogar and Tree, for the support. I also saw Evidence First briefly. So thank you, everyone who's been joining in, following. Definitely appreciate the support. Pokebear as well. This is something that I've been thinking of doing. I wasn't sure how successful this particular topic would be, but if I can have conversations like that, I'm more than happy to have keep doing this. But I think Pokebear actually was next.
What's good?
How are you? How old are you?
20.
20. All right. And was there a particular question or argument that you wish to run, or what brings you up here today?
I came up here for like I requested for some reason, but I wanted to latch on to something that was said in the last guest dialogue.
Yeah.
Like concerning God's knowledge and what constitutes it. And it seems like there's some relation, under your view, between like God's knowledge and reality. And what I kind of like, I saw a big parallel to like the Euphoro, right? Like reality is either, like God either like knows things because it like corresponds to states of reality, but it seems like you're saying what would be the other horn, which is things are real because God says they're real.
It's more of what God says is real. So how familiar are you with like classical theism?
I mean, familiar enough here.
Okay. Are you familiar with the understanding within classical theism that God is pure existence? Like he's pure being?
Yeah, that he is, I mean, equal to all of his attributes. He is the, like, being itself.
Yeah. So if God is pure being and that is the fullness of what he is, then it would stand to reason that whenever he does something, it is putting the fullness of being into that finite thing. So when God says, let there be X, let there be light, let there be, whatever, it is now the fullness of being that it could ever possibly be. And with that is why I was saying like what God says is true, in the sense of like what God does is he is the reason why things can even exist in the first place.
Okay, yep. As I know, the like Euphora, the problem with the second part is that there becomes a sense of arbitrariness. I think in this case it would be like even worse, even if you're going to say like it's good or like it is the thing itself, because that's that's usually the third option. But
yeah,
because what it's going to do is it's going to make reality arbitrary and like fundamentally mental. I don't know if you were an idealist, but I feel like that would follow.
So the reason why I say that, like, even though it's what there's a joke about like the divine command theory versus natural law, that a friend of mine shared. Natural law theory is just divine command theory by a different name. And when you get down to the ultimate foundational level of it, yes, you're right. Like they are pretty much, they're very similar in identity. The difference between divine command theory and natural law theory is, like you just expressed, the arbitrariness of it. So the response that I would have as far as like why it's not arbitrary is, it's not that, like, for example, God is dependent on the laws of logic, but if God is himself, we have the law of identity right there. So it's not that it's arbitrary, it's that God's nature in and of itself follows these rules, so to speak, but it's not due to uh, a limitation on him. It's just more of, we are describing reality, and metaphysical reality, not just like the physical temporal space-time that we exist in, but that the reality that includes the nature of God. And logic is that attempt to describe that includes that reality. The argument that I would use towards a believer as to why that would be the case is, if we are understood to be rational beings and God created us in his image, then a quote unquote part of God's image is rationality. So I don't see why I should expect arbitrariness or irrationality from the being whose image I'm created in.
I mean, that's fine. I would say all of that's just like consistent. The issue I'm taking is just like correspondence theory has this advantage wherein you can say it's describing states of affairs. In the case of things are what God thinks they are, it doesn't have that advantage, because in the grounding relation, God is prior to reality's instantiation. So what this would mean is that the foundational thing is God's mental states, even if he's perfectly rational, which is fine. Not only do I think that like locks the counterfactual accounts of all of God's actions, to say that just it limits him to doing the rational things, which there would be one of. But I also, if it doesn't do that, then it would just like strictly be arbitrary.
Well, for divine simplicity, we do say that there is only one act of God, and we're just experiencing different effects of it. So, even with that, like, God would be doing the rational thing, of which there's only one of. But that would also then be requiring on the goal. This is something I'm still exploring a little bit on how to parse and how to explain. But in the Catholic faith, we believe that God freely created us. And even Thomas Aquinas argues that God could have created the world differently, but that's not the same as God could have created the world better. So there are, a different states of reality that could have been, that would have been equally perfect, dependent on the goal or desire God has. So if God desired to be alone, him not creating would have been just as perfect as him creating. So the question then becomes less of why is he only doing this one action, but more of why is this one action in line with the goal. So the question is less of why did God do this way, and more of why does this action lead to God's goal.
Okay, I think this unfortunately makes it worse. If we're saying that there are multiple accounts like that God could instantiate to like give these counterfactuals, then I think it's just because he's perfectly rational, it just follows that there is no defeasible reasons for instantiation A over B, which makes it strictly purely arbitrary.
No, that's what I'm getting at. It's not arbitrary. If you want to get to it, the arbitrariness is the goal God selected. If the goal that God selected was solitude, then there is only one route to that solitude. If the goal that God selected is to share in his existence, then there would only be one route to that. So that's what I'm saying. It's like the question is then not on how the goal was achieved, because you're right, there is only one route, but the goal in and of itself. It's kind of like in chess, the end goal is to win. But if someone goes into chess to draw, they're going to pick different moves than the one who goes in with the end goal to win, and and vice versa. So the reason why it's not arbitrary is because the reasons are in relation to the end goal.
This
So
would
as
mean the
long as
goal is arbitrary. The goal would be the thing that's arbitrary.
Yeah, and there isn't necessarily an issue with that per se, as far as I can tell. Like I said, I'm still looking into the language of that aspect of things.
Well, if I could just like, the issue would be immediately for like simplicity, counterfactual accounts existing within God, active potency would exist within God because there are multiple counterfactual instantiations. Even if he just chooses one, that those things exist, that active potency exists.
Something that I did read that might help answer the question, and like I said, it's not something I'm fully well versed in, but just something to consider. The so you were talking about like the counterfactuals in regards for like, say, the knowledge aspect of it. What the person who holds to divine simplicity is going to say is that God's act of knowing is going to be the same regardless of the counterfactuals, regardless of what actually is the case. But what can be different is the knowledge itself, because
what is the case doesn't even make sense here, because God is what is the case. He is pure being. There is no outside of being in this case.
No, actually, we would say that, just like, this gets into a little bit of like the Platonic way of describing things, but like, an apple is red, but the apple is separate and distinct from redness. I have being and I participate in being, but I am separate and distinct from being. So there's still this separation and distinction between God as cause and those that have being as effects. There is that separation and distinction even within divine simplicity. It is a lot of people who didn't grow up with this language, or at least didn't grow up with the Aristotelian Platonic way of describing things, tend to arrive at the way that Thomas Aquinas describes this is kind of like a pantheistic thing where it is the sum totality of all of reality, when Thomas Aquinas is actually going to argue the opposite. When I was exposed to priority monism and how it's described, it sounded very similar to me to like Leibniz's ontological argument about the God is the perfection of all properties. And by that argument, God almost has parts, which Thomas Aquinas wants to deny. But by Leibniz's argument, which I think is what most people have sort of intuitive, they end up getting to an idea of God that is not the same as the Thomistic God, even if similar language is used to describe it. I don't know if that makes sense.
Right. I'm familiar with the idea that no metaphor will be adequate. But so, like, I'll just expand the scope even, because I think we all know divine simplicity has its issues, but there being this active potency in God breaks everything simultaneously, even if we don't consider divine simplicity. This arbitrariness of like a perfectly rational being, in which you want to say doesn't change, like including its mental states, or well, its goal would have to change. Like,
well,
that's
not necessarily.
no. But
well, no,
then
no,
there's
not necessarily, because, and this gets into like free will and things like that. I know people. First of all, I'm not a libertarian free will holder. I'm a compatibilist, and I am unconvinced, especially in B theory of time. Like, if I was to take a singular moment and ask if I had free will in that singular moment, my answer would be yes. even though nothing's changing, even though there's no difference, like I haven't moved from one goal to a different goal or not goal to goal in that moment.
Well, the problem is God's doing that, not that he's not doing that.
No, that's my argument, is that it can be the case for God, who is atemporal, who is outside of time, to have eternally have always desired a particular outcome and was never not in that position of desiring that.
Well, I would just grant this. I just grant this whole thing, and then I would say, yeah, it's possible, but it's not the case in virtue of this active potency, which instantiates different states of affairs.
Well, no, for God, he does not have potency in the Thomistic sense.
Well, I know he's not supposed to, but if his goals are arbitrary, he does.
I mean, by arbitrary, are you meaning went from not having to having?
No defeasible reason to choose one over the other.
I mean, I wouldn't say that there's no defeasible reason. Like, I wouldn't say that God would choose, God would not make a goal that, for the baby grinder world to exist. Like, that would not be a goal that God would have. There's still a reason behind it.
Well, yeah, we're just taking from the set of the perfect worlds. So, yeah.
Well,
but like of the perfect world, there's no, because he's perfectly rational and he has multiple options, there's no reason, because rationale is ruled out, literally, to pick one over the other, which makes it wholly arbitrary. Just the negation of reason.
No, so that's not what I was saying. So the goal, so like if God desires everyone to be in heaven with him, then he's going to pick the singular world that achieves that goal.
I thought there was more than one.
Well, no, what I was talking about, so like what I was talking about earlier about the more than one, is if we take like that, so that world is good. But let's say God only wanted a specific group of people in heaven, like the Calvinistic view, so to speak. I don't hold to that, but let's say for the sake of discussion that is the case, that is the goal that God desired. And from that, he creates a second world which has the same level of goodness from our perspective. Everything else is the same, but now only a select few people get into heaven. That is the only world that achieves that goal. So
I would say that like saying it's indexed to a certain perspective would make it much worse, because that's more arbitrary. If it's different from God's perspective than it is from ours, then there's not like a fact of the matter that's shared.
I don't see why a fact of the matter would need to be shared, but that's why I was also saying that the question is less of why is this the one world, but the fact that this is the one world that can achieve the end. What is unique about this world that achieves the unique end that God is desiring?
The goal is the arbitrary thing. That's the unique part. The goal that God chooses is based on apparently nothing.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying, is this like the arbitrariness that you're describing is not how I would define arbitrary. Like, there is reasons behind it. There is reasons and justification for picking that goal over another.
But not of the other perfect ones that are literally equal in their perfection.
Why would you decide to have, like, if you liked two, like, if you're picking two equally good things, there is some level of arbitrariness to it, but it's not irrational or unjustifiable. The arbitrariness,
it's just arbitrary.
But the issue or the problem that is being arose by the dilemma is whether or not that it would be absent of reason or justification. No, there is reason and justification for it. So
but
it's
not in the shared case between the perfect ones, because they're both instantiated by the same reasons. So picking one over the other. There is like there's like a thing for this. There's a philosophical thing for this. And like the way, like if you were to give one person two options without any like relevant facts, like which one would they choose? You know, it's like hard to predict. And this is like an argument for like free will, right? And the way that you would get around this, like strictly, is to say that like people have some sort of cognitive biasy that will make them prefer one over the other, but it's based on their priors. God doesn't have this excuse. God, in this example, picking between two options, he has the same reasons to pick. He doesn't have the excuse if he has cognitive biases, or at least I hope not. So what like he's left with is like literally we could not predict one over the other. This like the reason that this is like such a big problem is because not only is this arbitrary and like the exact potency, but this also means that the God hypothesis no longer makes predictions about what way the world would be. Like you could say it would be a perfect world, but we don't have epistemic access to that. And there is, I mean, the domain of perfect worlds could be infinitely big.
So one, I've never claimed that and I don't believe the Catholic Church claims that God is a hypothesis, or that theism makes predictions. Thomas Aquinas, in fact, directly refutes this idea, because there was a group of people who were trying to argue that one could show via necessity that God had to be a Trinity. One could show via necessity that the crucifixion had to happen. And he argues, no, we can't do that, because we can't make those predictions. But once we know the outcome, then we can use the fact that this path was used to reach this outcome. We can then use our reason to determine why that path and why that outcome was picked over others. But it was never claimed to be predictive.
Okay, so I thought for some reason you did like fine tuning. This view commits you to like there is nothing that can be derived from the existence of God. Nothing would be evidence of that, in the sense of it would be expected under the hypothesis.
No,
because it doesn't make predictions.
I don't think under the fine tuning, or like trying to do predictive powers, I don't think that can be the case. I do disagree with, oh well, you won't be able to come to knowledge of anything about God. I disagree. Like, I can know you, and because I know you, I know that you have parents. Now, I don't know anything else about your parents, but because of that connection, that inductive reasoning, I can come to that knowledge. Now, so as far as that aspect of that being able to come to knowledge about God by trying to do a prediction or a predictive hypothesis, I don't think that's the right approach. I also don't agree with a priori approaches, like the ontological type arguments. But I do think that one can still come to knowledge of God. It just wouldn't be through a hypothesis or predictive-based model.
Well, if it's not based on a predictive-based model, that pretty much leaves you with deductive reasoning, or like you couldn't do abductive because that's inference to the best explanation. You don't have predictive priors. And induction, I mean, you could say that the world like reflects upon God, but I don't even think you want to say that. But like if you don't like fine tuning, honestly, I just dropped the point. I think the much more interesting fact is this like arbitrariness, like this active potency within the being that is not supposed to have that strictly. And I mean, I just personally, I have not found a good way for myself to reconcile this. Like when I think about it, it always comes back to the goal is arbitrary and the goal is equal to God. I don't know what else to do.
I mean, I don't think that's accurate, but like I said, that's still something that I'm looking into. But if that is where, and you're looking into it and you're failing to find, a satisfactory explanation, that's fine. Like it's definitely a hard concept, and one that I'm still working through and looking into and trying to understand myself. But as far as the like I said, that predictive aspect of things, yeah, like I don't think that's required in order to arrive at God or need that to get to God.
Okay, well, I mean, thinking from it from my perspective, if I were trying to get to God, I know a couple things. First of all, we're ruling out entire modes of inference, like abduction. Deduction, I think, is very self-explanatorily not a way to come to God, at least, like, it's been tried for thousands of years. Induction, I actually think like, even if there was successful arguments for God, and this is the domain in which I'm the least apt in, but there is extremely successful inductive reasons for atheism. In Dad, did you hear me say causal closure?
I did not, but you were saying like, just it seems like all of the different ways that one could argue for God have failed to do so or are ruled out right from the gate. And there's lots of arguments. I think you said it was for abductive that show that there isn't a God.
Abductive is ruled out because we don't have priors. That's what we just did. And deductive, I think, is tried and true. I don't think it's succeeded in the millennia as it's tried. And then we're left with inductive, and that's why I was bringing up causal closure, because I think atheism is heavily successful in the inductive regard, which makes it so I don't really have like a mode of inference in which I could rationally conclude or even raise the probability.
Yeah, I'm currently working on an argument that is worldview independent that I think can get there. It's still a work in progress, but if you want to check out what I've got on my TikTok channel and see what you think of it. But as far as I know there's still some errors within it, and it collapses if one does not, or if one holds to priority monism. But that's something that I'm currently working on.
Oh, is it like an inductive case?
Let me see.
Does it take like a general rule and apply it universally?
I think so. That seems accurate to what I was trying to do.
Yeah, for all x, y, like for all observed x, y, therefore for all x, y.
The way that I formatted it was more of like, things are either this way or this way. And either everything is this way, everything is the other way, or it's a mixture of the two. Basically, either everything is x, everything is not x, or there's a mixture of x and not x's.
Okay, so this is kind of like, well, it's kind of abduct, but like that'd be a problem if God doesn't make predictions. But like I see if it's like just a probability analysis, that would be a priori. So I'm curious to know what this is. But like I think there's like some titans of the other side to go with. Like any auxiliary commitments like lowers the a priori probability of God. So like classical theism is just it's up the ass. And then you have other arguments like disembodied minds being inductively improbable. Then you have causal closure, Pickwickish causation being like you have perfect induction in like 5 different fields simultaneously.
Yeah, and in my experience at least, and it could just be like my own precognitive biases and things like that, but in my experience, a lot of the counter arguments to God, and I kind of touched on it with the last guest as far as like, the problem of evil, so to speak, where they brought up like natural evils. Well, for me, as someone who holds to privation theory, natural disasters does not fit under the category of evil. It's a category error. And in my experience,
well, interesting fact about me is I don't think the problem of evil goes through at all. So
okay, but but that kind of gets to the point is like I think for a lot of the arguments that are used against God are done against misconceptions of God, or at least the God that I've come to realize through my studies. Now, whether I'm able to answer every single question, I don't think I'll, especially not now, I'm able to. And I kind of doubt that I ever will be able to. But I still have the hope and belief that there is an answer to a question because it hasn't failed me yet, so to speak. But like, for example, you were bringing up about like, well, if this is what you're saying, then God has to have contingency, which, I understand that's the argument or claim that you're making, but I'm not sure that follows.
I'm not making a
And
modal contingency claim. It's
right, well,
purely
no.
inductive about bare theism.
Well, but that's what I was getting at, is like the as far as like whether, about the, God moving from not picking a goal to picking a goal. I'm not even sure that's even proper, analogical language that I would use. Like the analogy is the picked a goal in and of itself. But like I said, that's something that I'm still looking deeper into, as far as the church's position on that and the philosophical justifications for it, and things like that. But that's still something that I'm looking into.
Yeah, and to address that, like the reason this like rule of abduction is rules that God can have, which means that like if they're all perfectly rational, just if that statement is true, it follows that he has to arbitrarily pick one. Because in order to like have some reason to pick one over the other, one of them would be more perfectly rational, and none of them can be.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's true per se, just because of the way that I understand free will, which very well may be completely wrong. I do admit that free will is probably one of my weakest areas of knowledge, but that is something that I do need to look more into. But I'm willing to defer to, like, this is one of the few areas that I'm willing to defer to the church in, and admit that I don't know yet, as I look into some other areas that currently catch my interest, if that makes sense.
Right. And I'm just like literally my claim is just like given this, the other ways that we could come to the inference of God fall like so far short that it's like really bad.
Well,
but I would
like I
say
said,
that like I mean
check out the
we can
argument that
engage
I'm
with those, but
yeah, like I said, check out the argument that I'm working on, see like the approach that I'm trying to take, and just feel free to shoot me a DM or comment your thoughts, because like I said, it's a work in progress. I know that it falls to priority monism, so I definitely need to do a different approach to avoid priority monism. But check it out. Like that's the way that I tend to think about these kinds of problems. See if that help.
sure. I could give you a
you
more
out.
formal critique on Discord. Do you have a Discord
Okay.
channel?
Yeah, actually, I have a link tree. My account does not have permissions for links, but if you just copy paste the link tree in my profile, it will take you to my YouTube and my Discord for you to join.
Sure, I'll put that on my to-do list. Robust.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or just to make it easier, if you want, just shoot me a DM, and I can send you the link directly.
Sure. Well, glad to hear it. Very productive.
Yep.
See you around.
Absolutely. You have a good one, Pokey. All right. But thank you, everyone who's joined and been chatting. Let's see. We got Bradley Cooper and probably just Text Prediction also sending some gifts. Thank you so much for the support. I'm hoping you all are enjoying. Let's see. We've got actually probably just Text Prediction up.
All right, terribly sorry, but you're gonna have to give me a moment. You caught me in the middle of something. Sorry.
You're good. I'll drop you, move on to the next one, and then I'll get to you as soon as possible.
Hello.
Hey, DB.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
I'm 36. Yes.
All right. And what brings you up here today?
Yeah. So I just, I had a couple of questions to see what you think. I guess just like the problem of like unnecessary suffering. Like,
Okay.
what do you think of that?
So as far as like unnecessary suffering, I've seen a couple of arguments for it, and it's going to depend on how you arrive at it. But in almost every single situation, and this might sound horrible to say, but I'm not sure that sufficient support for the claim that there actually does exist unnecessary suffering has been fulfilled. There is a YouTube video that I did addressing an argument. It was actually someone's paper for his doctorate. And he formulated an argument. It was the ontological problem of evil. And what he did was he basically took two different arguments against God that he felt like didn't quite work, combined them together. And basically what he argues for is, imagine, there exists a world. So this is using Model logic. Are you familiar with Model possible world language?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so just the most important thing to understand, when I say a possible world, I don't mean like a Marvel multiverse type thing. I just mean it is possible for you to have walked out of the house with a different shirt on than the one you're currently wearing. That's all that
Right.
that means. It's something that it could have been different. And so the argument that he goes is, let us imagine a world where there is some justification for a particular suffering. All right. Now, and I forget the exact language that he used, but it didn't even need to be like a heaven hell type of justification. Like, because this person suffered, they went to heaven. Like the argument works even if you remove that aspect of it. So you have this particular suffering, and it has particular justification X. If that X, or if that justification is not necessary for the suffering, which it doesn't seem like any suffering would ever have a necessary justification. The justification is always post hoc, so to speak. It's after the event. It's a way to make up for the event, so to speak. Then we can imagine a world where that justification did not happen. And his argument is that because an all-good God has to be all good in all possible worlds, because that possible world exists where there is no justification for that suffering, that means that God can't exist, because there is a possible state of affairs or a way that the world could have been where that justification doesn't exist, which could not be the case if God existed. Basically, his argument is, if God existed, then it would be impossible for us to even be able to imagine a state of affairs where there is no justification for suffering. So I do have a video that goes a lot more in depth into my thoughts on it. And it's been a while since I've looked at it, but I have seen some very strong arguments, and that is the strongest version of the argument. I still don't think it succeeds. Actually, let me see if I can't pull up the script that I wrote for it. Let me see.
Yeah, well, I guess I don't know if I completely followed that, but like just like to 1 out of 10 children before 1900, before vaccines, were unalive from infectious diseases. Like, and you would think that God would want to have a relationship with everyone. So if that baby is unalive by age 1, I mean, it doesn't seem like that there's a lot of justification for that happening, right?
So that would depend on what is understood, or the understanding as far as like how or when and where the relationship is actually desired. So as far like within my particular worldview, the ultimate destination, or the ultimate argument, or the ultimate, I'm sorry, not the ultimate argument, but the ultimate way that God would want to have a relationship with a person is not necessarily here on earth, but for eternity in heaven. And I did find the paper. But yeah, So the argument would be that God could still have a relationship with that child that died at the age of 1. So that's the argument that is often made for it. And I know that it sounds very cold-hearted, but I guess the reason for it is that we think that God wants to, like, the common misconception is that God wants a relationship with us here on earth. That's part of it, but our life here on earth is more of us preparing ourselves to have that relationship with God. We're basically in the courting or dating period. And as we go through that, we'll eventually get to know God, come to love him, so that way then by the time that eternity comes around, we're willing and able to say yes to him. So the ultimate goal that God wants is not necessarily a relationship with us here on earth, but for eternity in heaven. And so that is why, like, a lot of these problem of evil justifications defer back to, oh, maybe it's what leads us to heaven. I don't necessarily like that, especially for the rhetorical baggage that comes with it. I think there's better ways to respond to it. But let me see here.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like that answer is a little like post hoc. But like, I mean, because this is like tremendous pain. Like we would not want that. Like, and the parents, of course, like they have to watch that. Like,
Yeah.
and this is 1 out of 10 children, and
Yep.
this happens all over the world, like
Yep.
every day. So like it is very hard to, because you could imagine a world where that. I mean, if I was a creator or something, I feel like I would eliminate that, you know. But another question I had, I guess, was about like kind of like design flaws, which is basically like cancer, because other animals such as like elephants and blue whales, they don't
And
have
even
cancer.
dinosaurs. Well, no, they do
Right.
have cancer.
Not
We found
elephants.
I think the reason why they do have cancer, but they don't die of cancer. But it's because that they are so big and their metabolism is so effective that cancer is never a threat to them. But they do get cancer cells, and
But
they do
it's
get
not
cancerous
it's not
growths.
an issue with them. It's not an issue with them.
Yeah.
It could have been the same, just like with most people that get prostate cancer. It's not an issue.
So something that is interesting within Catholic theology is something called the preternatural graces. So before the fall of Adam and Eve, not only did we exist as perfectly good humans, but there was also these extra special supernatural graces that Adam and Eve had that they were supposed to pass on to their children, that we were supposed to receive. One of which was immortality. Another was protection from suffering. And suffering here is a little bit more than just pain, but it is, but like all of these different things. Protection from cancer would have been a part of those supernatural graces, essentially. That is why the fall is so traumatic and so egregious in the Catholic perspective, is because God did intend for us to be protected from these things, and then it was thrown away. Now, why those were there in the first place, I saw something about like the the balance of ecosystems, and this all gets into like different fine-tuning aspects as far as like well, couldn't have God created things differently? I'm not entirely convinced, because as soon as you make things that are limited with physicality, you get into this conflict of like, in order to survive, the cat has to eat the mouse. Well, that's good for the cat, but bad for the mouse. So now you have this conflict. But that's just due to the nature of things being finite and limited. And I'm not sure you can create something that is physical or has physicality, or even without physicality. that isn't limited in some capacity. That's not something that I'm like fully convinced on as of yet. And a lot of the natural sufferings that we see from a Augustinian and Thomistic sense is it's not an evil in and of itself. It's just two conflicting goods at odds with each other.
So, but you really don't think that it could have been another way that God could have figured this out with, making genes correct, right?
Well, that's what I was saying is that was part of the preternatural gifts that were given to humanity before the fall, and then Adam and Eve threw those gifts away. That, like, in order for those genes to not be that particular way, it would need to be something outside of the natural realm, and that is what those preternatural gifts were.
I guess. Well, we also know that Adam and Eve did not exist, right?
So it depends on, like, I do not claim that there were a first two Homo sapiens. Like, that's not a claim that I hold to, and as a Catholic, you are permitted to hold to that. The Catholic
Do you
definition of
disagree with the Bible?
I don't hold to a literal 6-day creation account. No.
No. So they were wrong then.
No. So that's what I was saying. Is like a human being in the understanding of a Catholic Church is a physical creature with a rational soul. So let's say we discover intelligent alien life that have rational souls that live on Pluto. According to the Catholic Church, they are considered human beings. So a Homo sapien in the scientific understanding is equivalent to human being, but that's not necessarily the case in theological language, and so that's where the confusion comes in a lot of times. So it very well could be the case within the Catholic perspective for Adam and Eve to have been the first human beings, so physical creatures with a rational soul, of which we're all descended from, and there's something called mitochondrial Eve. It's either mitochondrial Adam and then something else for the Eve, but basically where we can eventually trace our descendancy and genetics to, it all comes down to, like, it basically extends outward like this, and then it starts to converge into the same points, where eventually you learn that you and your partner's great grandparents are actually one and the same person. And we have actually done the math to discover that for the entirety of the human species. But that doesn't mean that they were alone, which is the claim that some young Earth creationist makes that is counterfactual to science.
Right, but like there were no like first people, it's like the Latin language like eventually developed into English. Like there's not like a point, like there's like an arbitrariness of like when one became the other.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, so the position of the Catholic Church is that we all descended from the same two human beings, not that there had to have been a first two. The Catholic Church never makes that claim.
Okay.
So the position of the Catholic Church, or at least my particular interpretation of that, is you have a group of Homo sapiens, however that evolutionary line, occurred, and then you have this group of Homo sapiens. God then picks two of them and infuses a supernatural soul into those two, and it's from those two that we are all descended from.
Yeah, that also sounds very like post hoc. Like,
I mean,
all right. Well, yeah. What were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say, it might be post hoc in a sense. Like, I'm not gonna deny that, but it is in tradition with the way that the church has always engaged with science and the scriptures. So it's, I wouldn't say that like, it isn't unheard of, but it is something that came about because of new information about the way that we came to be as a physical species.
Right. I guess you would just expect like science and the Bible to converge, but they obviously don't, it seems.
That gets into like biblical hermeneutics. I've got another video on my channel that goes into how the church engages with biblical hermeneutics. But yeah, like the way that a lot of evangelical Christians engage with the Bible is not how the Catholic Church engages with the Bible, and has never been how the Catholic Church has engaged with the Bible.
Okay. All right. Well, I won't take up any more of your time. So,
Well,
but thank you for
appreciate you coming up.
talking.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Pokokurumi. Lou, glad to see you. I'm glad you could finally make it. I know you've been wanting me to be going live and to catch these lives. And thank you, Cyber Deacon, for the DJ glasses. But let's go ahead. Probably just text prediction is back.
Okay, let's try this again.
All right.
Okay,
All
so
right.
not big on. I'm over 18. And
I
I
figured
wanted
you
to
were,
run an
'cause
argument by you.
Yeah, because I've heard you on Ogar's lives. But all right, let me get the notepad up. All right, whenever you're ready.
So it's not a strict philosophical argument. It's more engages with people who are like Christian presuppositionalists, which I don't think you are.
Yeah,
But
no.
you're like the only person, like you're a person I think can have the discussion with me, and at least tell me if my thoughts are like moving in the right direction or just completely need to rethink this. Because like I said, not normally a philosophy guy.
You're
So
good.
like the idea being that like people that presuppose God have this idea that like you can't use logic unless you agree that logic is grounded in God's existence. So the idea that I bring is that like, well, can God change logic? And of course the answer would be either yes, God can change the laws of logic, which means they're arbitrary, in which case they don't have a grounding, they don't have anything that's grounded and solid.
Yeah.
Or God can't change the laws of logic, in which case he's subject to them like we are, and they don't seem to be grounded, quote unquote, in him. So like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so my issue with the presuppositionalist and the tag argument, or at least the argument as you presented it, I disagree with their entire premise as well. The very premise of presuppositionalism is the idea that we can't know God, we just kind of have to presume God, and then all of a sudden everything makes sense. So their arguments are circular in nature, and a lot of the people you're going to run into, while there are sincere proponents of the type of argument that you presented, and as I've explained to people, like, hey, once I've shown God, I can then show that logic is grounded in God, where it's not a vicious circle, it's more of a spiral type of argument. So like, I agree with their conclusion that like logic is grounded in God, but I disagree with their premise that like, no, you've got to presuppose God. But there's a couple of ways that I would go about trying to disprove their presupposition, so to speak, or at least their chain of reasoning within their presupposition.
Right.
The first one is, have you heard of the cogito ergo sum by Descartes, or I think therefore I am?
Hell no, I have not. You're gonna have to tell.
Okay.
I'm familiar with I think therefore I am, but where it came from, fuck, I didn't know.
You're good. You're good. So basically, what you're going to want to ask them is, can I know that I exist? They're going to say yes, because what the cogito, or what the I think therefore I am demonstrates is, because I am committing the act of thinking, even if solipsism is true and I can't know anything else, I can know that I exist, because in order for me to think, or for there to be thinking, there needs to be an agent doing the thinking. So even if everything else is an illusion, because of my act of thinking, I can know that there is an I.
Right.
Were you able to? Okay, perfect. So 99% of them, if they're honest, which I know is probably a little contradictory, but 99% of them are going to say, yes, you can know that you exist. From there, you can say, all right, because I know that I exist, I have grounded the law of identity, because I am myself. And from there, I have also identified that there is experience, or I am experiencing things, because what can I think like my thoughts are not me, and my experiences are not me, so I know that there is not me. The law of non-contradiction.
Right.
I cannot be not I. And I also know that I cannot be both myself and not myself, because I can't be both myself and my experience. Something has to be either me or it's not me. Law of excluded middle. You have just demonstrated or grounded the laws of logic in the cogito.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, that's a bit beyond me. Those aren't. I'd have a hard time remembering that. But it is interesting to see that there are ways to counter this argument outside of just agreeing with trying to just agree with their presupposition.
Yeah, like the thing is they're going to say, well, then that's circular, and you're going to ask them, well, then how did you get to your? Because they're going to say, well, you're just using logic to show logic, but that's circular. Well, then how did you show that God exists? They're either, if they actually know their argument, which they don't, they're going to say, well, I have to presuppose God because I can't prove God exists. And then you can just say, well, why should I accept something that can't be demonstrated? Why should I accept a presupposition? Why should I accept an act? Why should I accept that? But if they try to say, well, no, you can know it because once you accept it as a presupposition, then you're able to use the logic that's grounded in God to prove that God exists. And then you're able to say, well, isn't that circular? Aren't you just using the very thing to prove itself? Which it ultimately is. I spoke with I don't think he claimed to be Catholic, but he definitely was a Christian trying to run this argument in a Discord server once. And I pinned him down on it so hard that he eventually admitted, no, this is just to get the atheists to admit they don't know something, or they, basically admit loss, so that way they can score a victory point. And that's what a lot of these tag runners are really looking for. Because if you actually look at it, they're not having a conversation like you and I are, where we're slowly going through each idea, trying to make sure we're on the same page. They're just trying to score a point. They don't care about the truth. They don't care about what it is. All they're looking for is to get you to admit, you lost me, and they can use that to say, all right, I won the debate, bye, and go away.
Oh, if only they'd go away that easily. I guess maybe I'll give this some more thought. Like, I'm probably not going to do any reading on like formal philosophy. But like I do listen to you guys, and I listen to Ogar, so I get the gist of it. Like I've been told I'm good at like street philosophy. Like I can talk about the general ideas and have like a decent grasp of it. But when it comes to using like the actual language and knowing where it came from and shit, like it goes beyond me, and it's not worth learning in my day-to-day life. But I did want to actually have the conversation. You seemed at least. And I have one question before you go, because I was talking to somebody else who's familiar with you, and I want to clarify your position, because I wanted to make sure I didn't misquote you, and I don't misquote you in the future. I gotta remember now. You take it that like the 5 ways of Thomas Aquinas aren't meant to be like, you don't use those to engage with people who don't already believe in God.
Correct. Okay,
that's what I thought.
Yeah, so just to give a little bit, for the audience as well, but to help elaborate on that. So the Summa Theologica the Summa Theologica was written as a course book. It was literally for students going through university, getting their PhDs in theology, and they had just gotten their bachelor's in philosophy. So they're already very familiar with the philosophical arguments that Thomas Aquinas is alluding to in the 5 ways. So the 5 ways are summations, at least the way that they're written, summations of more in-depth arguments. And even just the way that Thomas Aquinas is summarizing them or utilizing them in the Summa is more of, by the way, this is, following this chain of thought, we get to this, and this is my definition for God. God, moving forward, God is just that which is the ultimate cause of all things. God is just that which all things have as their end. God is just that, like, he's going through. And an interesting thing about it is, if you're familiar with the Aristotelian 4 causes, almost, we get a bonus fifth one, but he's addressing how God is each of the four causes, so to speak. But as far as like him trying to give an actual philosophical argument, that's not what the five ways are for.
Gotcha. That's kind of what I just find it interesting because see, like a person like me, like I don't engage with philosophy a whole lot in these discussions, but it does come up pretty frequently. Like, oh, what Thomas Aquinas has these arguments, and I think they're bulletproof. And it was just interesting to hear someone say, well, they're not even supposed to be. You're just misusing things. It was just interesting. That was all.
As my seminary,
I thought it was an interesting opinion.
Yeah, as my seminary teacher once said, he had his doctorate in medieval philosophy. If Thomas Aquinas could hear the way people are using his five ways, he'd be spinning in his grave.
Interesting indeed. All right, well, thank you for your time.
Absolutely, glad to have you up.
Yep, take care.
All right. I'm actually going to go ahead and call it. I got to start getting ready for dinner soon. With the new schedule, I'm having a bit of an early morning days, but trying to make sure I get into bed earlier. But yeah, thank you all for coming. I think this was successful, a lot more successful than I actually expected it would be. Because like I said, I didn't think I'd get a lot of people who would want to come up and have questions like that. But thank you all for coming. Thank you all so much for the support. Once again, Poopman Jones, Pokebear, Bradley Cooper, probably our previous guest, I probably just Predictive Text, I think was the full name, Pokegurumi, Lou, Cyber Deacon, as well as everyone else who shared and commented. I saw Ogar show up, Evidence First. I've been on both of their lives. Let me see. I think Ogar should. Well, no, he's not live yet. But let me see. Oh no, Ogar is live right now. So everyone, go check out Ogar. He is a very, very, very linear. Unless you are extremely ready to give a direct linear without any waffling or any fluff, do not call in. But go listen to Ogar, listen to some of the pushbacks that he gives, and try to figure out a way to respond to it, or even just make a note of it. And the next time I'm live, you can bring it up and say, hey, I saw this happen. How do I respond? But everyone go to Ogar and tell him that I sent you.